Hey guys, tonight we stumble into the clouds to find a winged horse with a divine attitude problem and a fruit addiction worthy of epic poetry. You're at Mount Helicon, boots damp with mist and the kind of cold that smells like thunder's breath. The sky above growls, the wind swirls dramatically, clearly auditioning for a role in somebody's Tempest. And Pegasus? He's crouched in a hollow, refusing to fly, tail twitching like the world's most stubborn windsock. You approach cautiously. His mane sparkles faintly, a mythological trait most modern hair products aspire to. One eye is trained on a distant apple orchard, the other glares at the heavens like he's owed royalties. It's not the majestic gallop through the clouds vibe you were promised. Pegasus sulks. The muses pace nearby, whispering in verses and nervous couplets. Somewhere behind you, Apollo sighs loudly into a harp. You probably won't survive this myth intact. Pegasus isn't just moody, he's selectively divine. His wings are capable of flight, but only on days when the emotional weather cooperates. Today, it does not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time down below. I love seeing how far these bedtime tales travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your cloak flaps, the mountain grumbles, the sacred spring bubbles with passive aggression. Pegasus flicks his tail and stares into the apple orchard like someone plotting a heist. This isn't about altitude, it's about attitude. Mythology's finest flyer has grounded himself, and the gods are panicking. Fringe fact: Mount Helicon was sacred to the Muses, often considered the birthplace of poetry and inspiration. Historians still argue whether Pegasus's sulking disrupted literary output for months or simply inspired emotional haikus. The wind shifts. A satyr trips over a cloud fragment. You sneak closer. Pegasus lifts his head slowly, sighs like a diva at dress rehearsal, and mutters, "I'm not flying until I'm offered something shiny." You blink. Shiny what? The muses whisper, "Fruit." And not just any fruit. Apples. You tiptoe through a grove of apple trees that shimmer oddly, half sunbeam, half unsolicited magic. Pegasus still refuses to budge from his hilltop sulking zone. His wings twitch occasionally, more decorative than aerodynamic. You settle on a mossy rock and attempt to unravel how this winged icon came to be, and why he's holding the heavens hostage over produce. It starts with Medusa, yes, the snake-haired icon of mythic nightmares. Poseidon, in a moment of legendary recklessness, falls for her. Romance happens. Athena gets involved and turns Medusa into a gorgon as divine punishment. Then Perseus enters the story and slices off Medusa's head, which, odd detail, gives birth to Pegasus. Right there, no stork, just winged horse exploding from a decapitated moment. Fringe fact: Pegasus isn't alone in the post-Medusa drama. Chrysaor, a golden warrior, also emerges, but gets dramatically less poetic attention.
Historians still argue whether Pegasus's popularity is due to his sky-friendly branding or simply being easier to sketch in marble. You watch the muses rehearse their explanation to Olympus. They get tangled trying to describe Pegasus's birth without alarming children or confusing minor gods. "He is poetry born from monstrosity," one muse whispers. Another says, "He's a winged reboot of poor decisions." Pegasus was gifted flight from birth, soaring across the skies as a divine messenger, poet's mount, and literal rain cloud chaser. He struck the Hippocrene spring with his hoof, unleashing poetic waters. He carried Zeus's thunderbolts. He had his own constellation. It was all very glorious, until he discovered apples. You glance back at him. The orchard glows faintly. Pegasus swishes his tail and mutters something about ambrosia not cutting it anymore. The muses sigh. Fruit diplomacy begins. Zeus sends a basket, apples dusted in starlight, wrapped in lightning threads, and accompanied by a note: "Fly or don't, but eat first." Pegasus sniffs the air, doesn't move. You're starting to suspect this myth hinges less on destiny and more on complex produce negotiation.
You crouch behind a boulder, shaped vaguely like Hera's frown, as Pegasus flicks one wing and continues his fruit-induced protest. The gods have sent multiple apple offerings, but the winged horse remains firmly grounded, hooves planted like mythological metaphors. Today's flight schedule? Delayed by mood. Pegasus wasn't always so dramatic. Back in the early days, he zipped around Mount Olympus, delivering lightning, collecting poetry, and avoiding romantic entanglements with other mythic beings. His flight was considered sacred, graceful, swift, and occasionally blurry due to altitude and enthusiasm. But somewhere along the way, things soured. You hear whispers among the nymphs. Pegasus once stalled mid-gallop across the sky and refused to resume until someone complimented his mane. Another rumor claims he took a 2-week vacation in a cloud and refused to respond to weather summons. Historians still argue whether Pegasus's flight refusals represent divine resistance or a winged identity crisis. Fringe fact: one scroll depicts Pegasus landing on a mortal picnic and refusing to leave until he was given something shiny and emotionally validating. It's likely exaggerated, but the pattern is real. The muses gather. Each tries a different approach. One sings a ballad. Another presents a sketch of Pegasus surrounded by admiring olives. A third builds a sculpture entirely from feathers and good intentions. Pegasus inspects the offerings, lifts a hoof, and says, "I require apples, not art." You sigh. Apples it is, again. Zeus escalates matters. A formal edict. Pegasus must resume flight for celestial deliveries and poetic tourism. In return, he'll receive daily apples, flexible hours, and honorary status as equine director of mythical transport. The scroll is gilded, dramatic, and smells like thunder. Pegasus snorts. "No gala?" You blink. Gala?
He points to an orchard sign, Gala apples, except no substitutes. Flying wasn't the problem. It was respect, and apparently very specific produce. You scribble notes on divine negotiation and consider writing a management manual. Mythical flight teams, how to bribe a horse with prestige and fruit. You shuffle toward the Hippocrene Spring, where legends say Pegasus once struck the earth with his hoof and summoned waters blessed with inspiration. Today, the spring bubbles with mild grumpiness. Poets sit along its edge, mumbling into scrolls. The Muses, 9 immortal sisters of creativity, pace in frustrated choreography, their sandals soaked in divine anxiety. Pegasus remains parked uphill, wings folded like unopened fan mail, eyeing the fountain like it owes him royalties. The atmosphere hums with expectant failure. The poets were promised airborne inspiration, thunderous metaphors, stanzas stitched by clouds. Instead, they're getting mumbles, ink smudges, and the occasional rhyme about soggy olives. All because the sacred flyer refuses to flap. Fringe fact: some ancient poets bathed in the Hippocrene Spring, hoping to absorb talent osmotically. One scroll describes a man who drank the water, wrote 6 lines of sheep-based poetry, and declared himself a genius. Historians still argue whether the spring offered true inspiration or just a placebo effect for dramatic personalities. You sit beside a muse named Clio. She's chewing a fig and lamenting Pegasus's refusal. "She's always been moody," she whispers. We think he read a review once that called him a decorative plot device. It broke something inside. The other muses hold a miniature council. Calliope, the muse of epic poetry, scribbles pros and cons on a wax tablet. Erato tries singing Pegasus a love sonnet. Thalia juggles apples in a sad attempt at comedic bribery. None of it works. Pegasus remains aesthetically dormant. A young poet attempts dramatic persuasion. He recites a tragedy involving cloud betrayal and melon theft. Pegasus yawns. Someone throws a metaphor. It misses. You glance at the spring. Its waters ripple oddly, as if inspiration itself is caught in a mythological delay. Pegasus snorts. "He wants better apples," a muse says finally, "and validation, possibly embossed." You sigh. Your next assignment? Navigating divine apple procurement with enough flair to impress a winged horse who once flew between constellations and now critiques poetry from a hill. You trail the muses down a winding orchard path, framed by vines that hum softly in anticipation, probably out of fear of Pegasus's palate. The apple dilemma has grown diplomatic. The winged horse remains grounded, surrounded by offerings so abundant the orchard now resembles a high-stakes bake-off. Pegasus surveys the fruit like a judge on a reality show entitled Divine Produce, Fly or Die. Zeus, desperate and mildly offended, dispatches Hermes with a basket inscribed with celestial glyphs reading, "Fly already." Inside, apples infused with ambrosia, wrapped in cloud silk and polished to shimmer in starlight. Pegasus sniffs once, shrugs, and knocks the basket downhill. The gods regroup. Fringe fact: ancient myths mention the Garden of the Hesperides, a mythical orchard of golden apples. Some scrolls say these apples granted immortality. Others claim
They just tasted vaguely of divine smugness. Historians still argue whether Pegasus's preference for apples stems from cosmic memory or mythical marketing. A meeting is called on Mount Olympus. Zeus hosts, seated on thundercloud furniture. Hera brings pie. Artemis sulks. Apollo composes a ballad mid-discussion. Dionysus arrives late with grapes and dramatic opinions. Topic: Pegasus and apples. Action plan: bribery escalation. Poseidon, who arguably started this whole winged mess, suggests ocean-flavored apples. Athena proposes logic-flavored ones. Aphrodite offers apples grown from romantic tension. None are accepted. You're tasked with documenting everything. You sit beside Hermes, who doodles Pegasus riding a chariot pulled by apples. I think he wants symbolism and snacks. Meanwhile, Pegasus folds his wings, lowers his gaze, and mumbles, "I asked for fruit with meaning, not snacks with delusions of grandeur." You blink. Fruit diplomacy has reached existential levels. The orchard expands. Special cultivars arrive: ambrosia, cosmic gala, thundercrisp, and one glowing apple called hope. Pegasus finally turns his head. The muses gasp. He sniffs hope. Then he sneezes. Unmoved, the saga continues. Someone mutters, "He'll only fly if the apples include narrative arcs." You scribble notes titled Emotional Produce and Mythic Mood Swings. Pegasus demands character development in apples. And tomorrow, a mortal hero named Bellerophon makes everything worse. You climb a hill freckled with celestial compost and trees that shimmer like someone whispered compliments into their roots. Pegasus surveys the orchard below, eyes narrowed, wings folded tighter than Zeus's tax records. The apple situation? Evolving. The gods are throwing fruit like inspiration, and Pegasus, divine diva of the skies, is treating each offering like a mystery audition for flavor, symbolism, and respect. Today, the apples have leveled up. Golden delicious, polished with ambrosia. Ambrosia apples dipped in actual ambrosia. Crimson moon apple known for its mild sass and notes of mythical bitterness. Dionysus presents Chaos Crunch, an apple that shifts flavor depending on your mood. Pegasus licks it, sneezes, and adds it to the maybe pile. Fringe fact: ancient myths mention magical apples used in weddings, contests, and divine bribery. One particularly intense scroll describes apples that sing poetry if bitten dramatically. Historians still argue whether these apples symbolize fertility, immortality, or high-stakes passive aggression. You help Hermes arrange a tasting table. Elegantly curved wood, velvet cloth, misty lighting. Pegasus circles once, lands with the gravitas of someone judging cloud couture, and samples. No flight, just nibble and critique. "This one lacks existential flavor," he mumbles, spitting seeds into a thundercloud. The muses gather. Melpomene stages a tragic reenactment where the apple begs Pegasus to fly before its symbolic relevance rots. Euterpe composes an apple-inspired lute solo. Terpsichore choreographs a dance where apples levitate and whisper compliments. Pegasus yawns. Then sniffs an apple called Solar Bloom, rumored to bloom only when read poetry.
A poet recites a love ode about stables and altitude. The apple glows faintly. Pegasus raises one eyebrow. Hope flickers. Apollo, in a dramatic flourish, presents the last offering, an apple infused with sunlight, seasoned with sincerity, and named, "Please fly before Zeus has a meltdown." Pegasus snorts. You lean in. He nibbles, then stands, but doesn't lift off. He blinks. I might stretch. Everyone freezes. Dionysus drops a grape. Progress, sort of. You scribble into your scroll bribery notes. Wings may require emotional snacks and metaphorical applause. Tomorrow, Bellerophon arrives with ego, armor, and very bad timing.
You duck behind a shrub shaped like Zeus's failed beard attempt as Bellerophon struts into the scene wearing polished armor and an ego that reflects sunlight. The mortal hero, legendary for defeating the Chimera, now believes he's the answer to the Pegasus problem. You sigh audibly. Pegasus twitches his tail and regards Bellerophon like someone who's just been asked to perform at a wedding they weren't invited to. Bellerophon approaches confidently. "Fly with me," he declares, holding out a saddle lined with heroic promises. Pegasus glances at it like it's covered in taxes. The muses whisper nervously. You sip cider and brace yourself. The mortal isn't discouraged. He references past adventures, like that one time he defeated a fire-breathing monster using wit, sweat, and a suspiciously helpful wind. He tries persuasion. "We're destined," he says. "I'm your true partner." Pegasus snorts. Historians still argue whether Bellerophon was ever truly Pegasus's bonded rider, or just a glorified hitchhiker. Fringe fact: some myths say Pegasus willingly aided Bellerophon at first, helping defeat monsters with skyborne swoops. Others suggest divine intervention bribed Pegasus to cooperate. And one scroll implies Pegasus only agreed because he mistook Bellerophon for someone who brought actual snacks. You watch the rehearsal unfold. Bellerophon mounts, carefully, dramatically. Pegasus doesn't budge. Bellerophon recites a speech. Pegasus yawns. The saddle squeaks. Somewhere, thunder chuckles. The muses tried diplomacy. "Remember your glory days," they offer. Pegasus mutters, "I don't dislike mortals. I just dislike being treated like a shiny ladder." Bellerophon blinks. You translate quietly. "Bring better fruit." He leaves to consult apple merchants. Pegasus resumes his sulk. And tomorrow, the gods try bribery. Again. With fluff, sparkle, and one unnecessary harp solo. You tiptoe into an Olympus courtyard scented with cloud fluff and mild desperation. Today's bribery efforts go full sparkle. The gods have regrouped with renewed determination and an unnecessarily elaborate PowerPoint scroll titled Operation Convince the Horse. Pegasus circles lazily overhead, wings extended just enough to cause divine heart palpitations. He's airborne, but only slightly. You sip celestial cider and settle into a cloud lounger. The bribes escalate. Hera offers a saddle woven from moonlight and marital tension. Apollo composes an orchestral Fly Now symphony. Artemis crafts a bow that can shoot apples into nostalgic metaphors. Dionysus, naturally, offers fermented grapes and interpretive dance. Pegasus inspects everything, nods at the saddle, sneezes at the song, licks the grapes. No takeoff. Fringe fact. Ancient mythology includes countless divine negotiations, many involving food, weather, or stylish accessories. One lesser-known myth claims Poseidon tried to bribe a sea turtle to deliver mail in exchange for glittery kelp. Historians still argue whether bribery was divine tradition or just how bored gods dealt with stubborn mythological figures. You sit with Athena, who's trying logic-based persuasion. She insists, flight is useful. Pegasus replies, so is fruit. Hermes mumbles, I brought apples with soul. Pegasus licks one. Still no launch. The Sky Council gathers. A formal vote begins. Scrolls unfurl. Debates arise over snack ethics, saddle embellishments, and the emotional labor of flying. You take notes. Zeus gets mildly dramatic. Finally, a proposition is passed. Pegasus shall receive honorary recognition as equine artisan of the sky, including cloud art commissions, seasonal apple deliveries, and exemption from boring errands. A golden plaque is engraved mid-vote. Pegasus reads the terms, blinks slowly. He replies, only if I get the sparkly saddle and exclusive apple rights. Approved. Sealed in thunder. He lands, sniffs a pile of customized ambrosia apples, then performs a single wing flap that sends a breeze through Apollo's sheet music. Progress. Almost. Tomorrow you stumble into Pegasus's troubled backstory, because trauma and mythology go together like thunder and emotional snacks. You stumble into a grove shaped suspiciously like a trauma support circle. Pegasus sulks beside a stone etched with what looks like ancient hoof poetry. Today's mission: uncover the winged angst lurking behind flight refusals and apple negotiations. The mood? Mythical melancholy with hints of equine existentialism. The muses gather quietly. One strums a lyre. Another places a commemorative apple near Pegasus's favorite pouting spot. A hush settles. You sit nearby, wrapped in cloud-scented fleece, listening as whispers float through ivy leaves. Stories of a winged birth, unstable stables, and a childhood shadowed by snakes. Pegasus never knew his mother. Medusa was slain before introductions. Instead, he emerged from chaos and immediately soared. No lullabies, just sky. Raised in Olympus, shuffled between gods, and occasionally asked to deliver weather. No formal schooling, no horse companions, just altitude and orders. Fringe fact. Some lesser-known myths claim Pegasus once attempted to befriend mortal horses, but was chased off for being too sparkly. One bard wrote a sonnet about equine rejection that was later adapted into a dramatic puppet show. Historians still argue whether Pegasus's trauma stems from divine isolation or just the rough politics of winged existence.
You listen as a muse named Polyhymnia explains, "He never flew for himself, only others." You nod. Flying became task, not joy. Apples aren't just snacks, they're choices, rewards, reminders that Pegasus controls his own narrative now. Another whisper, Pegasus once crash-landed mid-delivery, hurt a wing, and overheard a god call him interchangeable. That hurt more than the fall. Since then, flight isn't automatic, it's earned. You creep closer. Pegasus eyes the sky, then the orchard, then you. He wants applause, he mutters. You blink, not for ego, for recognition, for the journey. The muses begin a soft chant, not a plea, a tribute. Pegasus stands, tail swishes, wing flutters. Tomorrow, trial flights begin with mild drama, celestial side-eye, and one surprising refusal to flap.
You shuffle into the divine paddock, where freshly polished cloud chariots sparkle in the sunlight and winged creatures stretch like they've just discovered yoga. Today's event, Pegasus's trial flights. There's drama in the air, possibly from the altitude, definitely from the egos. You settle beside a muse who hands you a snack labeled Emotional Endurance Apple. You chew thoughtfully as Pegasus takes sky center stage. He flaps once, lands, flaps again, hovers, refuses to flap a third time unless his tail is braided aesthetically. The muses scurry to comply. The chariot commission peers nervously from a platform carved out of thunder. Hermes adjusts a stopwatch. A satyr records statistics. Pegasus circles once. Everyone holds their breath. He lands again. Fringe fact. Pegasus once participated in an ancient sky chariot race, defeating 5 competitors and unintentionally igniting a week-long argument about mythological speed limits. Historians still argue whether trial flights serve functional testing or symbolic melodrama. Today's trials test speed, stamina, flair, and snack-assisted takeoff. Pegasus performs a modest liftoff with minor theatrical flourish, then dives elegantly into a mist bank. Applause erupts from the cloud benches. Dionysus tosses grapes with celebratory recklessness. You jot down notes. Flight assessment. Low altitude, high attitude. Then rumors swirl. Sabotage? One apple laced with garlic. A saddle strap replaced with poetic metaphor. You investigate. The gods deny everything. Zeus coughs. Pegasus performs another arc, this time over a poetry recital, causing scrolls to flutter and one poet to declare himself airborne emotionally. But then, Pegasus pauses, mid-air, refuses to complete the spiral unless the audience recites appreciation haikus. They do, loudly. A wing flick, he resumes. The muses initiate celebratory interpretive dance. Someone breaks into verse. Apollo sketches a cloud mural mid-air. Pegasus circles once more, lands gently, and sniffs the congratulatory apple, honey-glazed with a side of metaphor. Trial passed. Emotion preserved. Drama pending. You record everything. Tomorrow, the muses stage a full theatrical intervention, complete with costumes, moral dilemmas, and possibly a cardboard moon. You sink into a velvet cushion shaped like dramatic foreshadowing as the muses swarm the courtyard with scrolls, props, and emotional ambition. Today's plan? Theater. Not the usual divine pageantry, but a full-scale intervention play designed to convince Pegasus that flying isn't a chore, but an artistic necessity. You're handed a lyre and told you'll be playing Conflicted Fig Tree number 3. You blink. The script is intense. The title, Wings of Hesitation. A muse directs with choreography that includes exaggerated sighs and slow-motion mane tosses. Pegasus watches from his hill, skeptical but intrigued. The story centers on a winged horse who forgets his identity until a magical apple and community theater restore his spirit. You suppress a snort. Fringe fact: ancient Greek drama was sometimes performed as ritual therapy, combining narrative catharsis with communal healing. One lost play involved a cloud who couldn't commit to raining and solved its dilemma through interpretive lightning. Historians still argue whether dramatic interventions were literal cures or divine group projects with excellent costumes. Pegasus remains perched. The play begins. Scene 1, emotional denial in a fruit-scented stable. You hum softly in the background. Scene 2, the apple of truth delivers a monologue about growth, risk, and dietary symbolism. Pegasus tilts his head. Scene 3, confrontation. A fictional muse asks the winged horse why he fears flight. The horse answers with a poem titled "Gravity is Not My Problem." The audience gasps. Pegasus blinks slowly. Then, Scene 4, transformation. A solo performance featuring a saddle, a metaphor, and one glowing apple held aloft like a lightning trophy. Music swells. You tear up involuntarily. Pegasus snorts again, but softer. The final act. The sky calls. Pegasus hesitates. The chorus chants. You pluck your lyre gently. Pegasus stands. Wings twitch. Applause. Real. Scattered. Emotional. He doesn't fly, but he bows. Progress. You scribble in your scroll, theatrical manipulation and equine ego, a case study. Tomorrow he lifts off briefly, then circles back for more apples and praise.
You're reclining on a golden rug, embroidered with apples, mid-poem, as Pegasus hovers just above the orchard. He's mid-air, technically flying, but also muttering critiques about saddle sparkle and artistic acknowledgement. You squint upward, trying to determine whether this counts as takeoff or theatrical levitation. The gods are debating it too. Hermes has created a hover chart. Zeus is stress snacking on thundercloud crumbs. Pegasus circles once, lands, nibbles a crimson moon apple, then flaps again, briefly. Dionysus declares it a spiritual ascent. The muses stage a celebratory haiku performance. You record everything in your scroll titled Equine Motivation, when fruit sparks flight and feelings. Fringe fact: ancient ceremonies sometimes featured symbolic ascents. A performer or object briefly lifted skyward as metaphor for transcendence. One obscure ritual involved levitating bread to honor harvest deities. Historians still argue whether Pegasus's brief flights serve as actual transport or high-concept mythological theater. The crowd of deities and poets holds a vote. Majority rules, flight qualifies, but only if apples remain part of the arrangement. A new document is drafted, Pegasus Accord V2, stipulating apples per flight, creative credit, and seasonal fig stipends. You sign as witness and occasional apple polisher. Pegasus seems satisfied, for now. He twitches his wings and declares, "I prefer altitude with emotional relevance." You nod solemnly. The orchard rustles in agreement. A ripple of artistic inspiration spreads through Olympus. Poets write odes. Scrolls are dusted. One muse choreographs a modern dance titled Apples in Altitude. The air smells faintly of accomplishment and fruit salad. You stroll with Pegasus through the grove. He talks about early career regrets, why ambrosia lacks crunch, and how winged creatures deserve better unions. You listen, scribbling insights. He flaps again, lifts a few feet, circles, then lands to pose beside a statue depicting his birth. The plaque reads, "Born in chaos, flew for fruit." You grin. Myth has officially adapted. Tomorrow, the Sky Council formalizes a new ritual: flying snacks and honorary titles. Pegasus prepares his acceptance speech.
You lounge beneath a cloud sculpture shaped like an apple with wings, as the Sky Council gathers for its most important meeting since Poseidon accidentally flooded the divine bowling alley. Pegasus stands center stage on a polished cloud dais. The Muses adjust his mane. Dionysus pours celebratory cider. Today's vote? Apple sanctification and honorary titles. The stakes: snacks and sky supremacy. Zeus opens with thunderous flair. "We gather to honor our winged ambassador of altitude and attitude." Apollo plays background harp. Hera frowns poetically. The scroll of proposals is read aloud. Ritual apples, seasonal snack rights, and one clause about ambrosia-free gifting zones. Pegasus listens, tail twitching. "I demand gala representation," he murmurs. Hermes notes it down. The council votes, scrolls flutter, lightning crackles gently. Final verdict: apples shall be sacred offerings for flight ceremonies, emotional support, and spontaneous myth-making. Pegasus is awarded the title Snack Oracle of the Sky. Fringe fact: some classical festivals included fruit offerings not just for nutrition, but symbolic energy exchange. One Roman scroll describes a pigeon receiving an apple and promptly reciting poetry. Historians still argue whether food rituals stemmed from devotion or accidental hunger during worship.
You assist with the ceremonial fruit pyramid. Apples stacked by theme, inspiration, altitude, and ego management. Pegasus examines the tiers, selects one labeled Narrative Crunch, and hovers approvingly. An official emblem is unveiled. Pegasus in mid-flight, surrounded by orbiting apples. It's minted onto coins, sculpted into temple lintels, and carved into lunch trays across Olympus. Pegasus stands. Wings lift. He rises slowly, dramatically, then dives through the emblem banner, scattering apple confetti. Applause thunders. Dionysus weeps softly into his goblet. You jot down the moment in your scroll. When fruit became ritual and a horse became brand. Tomorrow, poets erupt. They write too much. Pegasus reads half, critiques font choices, and demands verse scented with fig.
You inch into a circular amphitheater, carpeted with parchment scraps and half-finished sonnets. The scent of ink, ego, and metaphors hangs thick in the air. Pegasus lounges center stage beneath a banner that reads Poetic Legacy Fest. Mane slightly tousled, wings half extended for dramatic ambience. Today, the poets arrive. By scroll, by cloud, by interpretive wind. Their mission? Praise the flight, honor the fruit, and overshare. You take a seat between a muse and a goat wearing laurels. Scrolls unfurl. Recitations begin. Pegasus is addressed as Sky's Sonnet, Equine Echo of Elysium, and Fruit-Fueled Rhapsody. He listens with majestic indifference. Fringe fact: in some versions of Greek myth, Pegasus's flight inspired not just poetry, but architecture. One temple design was reportedly modeled after his wing-beat rhythm. Historians still argue whether these tributes were sincere homage or fan fiction scribbled by star-struck marble sculptors. A bard from Lesbos offers a hymn involving grapes, regret, and altitude. Pegasus yawns politely. A young poet recites a haiku. Apple glows mid-air. Pegasus sniffs, then rises. Clouds applaud softly. Dionysus weeps softly and declares it narratively edible. You jot the moment into your scroll. Flight motif reactions, poetic overload, and divine eye roll. The muses join in, their stanzas braided with myth, snacks, and celestial nuance. One poem references Pegasus's childhood trauma via extended metaphor involving neglected stable doors. Pegasus snorts, then nods. That one hit. Scrolls stack high. Pegasus gets honorary font styles named after him. Pegasus bold, Pegasus italicized with grace. Zeus approves a new poetic license involving wings and orchard references. You draft a quick verse titled The Horse That Paused and Made Poets Panic. Pegasus stands, wings unfurling, and circles once, just enough to stir the scrolls. A poet faints, applause erupts, the goat claps. You lean back, surrounded by verses and praise, watching Pegasus inhale deeply as if poetry itself is finally a worthy wind. Tomorrow, the journey ends with legacy,
constellations, and a treaty clause involving apples forever.
You drift into a twilight orchard where the breeze smells like fig leaves and legacy. Pegasus stands beneath an arch sculpted from starlight and snack metaphors. His mane shimmers faintly. A plaque nearby reads, Pegasus, winged legend, apple negotiator, sky consultant. Tonight, mythology traces its hoofprints through time, and you're here for the closing flight. Constellations blink overhead. Pegasus nods toward his celestial self, eternally airborne in the night sky, captured as the starry Pegasus constellation, quadrilateral body and all. It's poetic. Coin presses clink nearby. New currency featuring Pegasus mid-flight, holding an apple and smirking. Merchandising is eternal. Fringe fact: the Pegasus constellation was officially catalogued by astronomers in ancient times and still twinkles proudly today, though wing detail accuracy is hotly debated. Historians still argue whether the constellation honors myth, astronomy, or celestial snack delivery services. You watch the orchard host a final ceremony. Apples are stacked in tribute. Stanzas float in lanterns, and one muse recites a farewell ballad involving wings, weather patterns, and artistic boundaries. Pegasus flaps twice, lifts off gently, but before full departure, he circles back and presents a scroll. The Apple Clause. It guarantees seasonal apple tributes, emotional acknowledgement via poetry, no forced flights unless inspired, artistic input on future myths. Zeus signs, Apollo flourishes, Dionysus doodles grapes. Pegasus takes off, graceful, slow, not rushed. This flight is self-authored. Below, poets cry softly, gods raise goblets, and clouds reposition themselves for optimal ambiance. You jot the closing line in your scroll. He flies because he chose to, not because he was asked. A final swoop cuts through moonlight. You sigh. The story ends, not in thunder, but soft gusts and satisfied equine sass. Now, the wind down. As the clouds stretch thinner and the orchard fades into dusk, let yourself ease into stillness. The hoofbeats, once firm and symbolic, soften into memory, like echoing verses you only half remember but know matter deeply. Pegasus, once hesitant and hungry for respect, has soared beyond myth and into gentle legend. Let your shoulders release tension, like wings folding after a journey. You've walked beside a God-touched creature who defied expectation, demanded fruit-based dignity, and reminded the skies that flight must be chosen, not assumed.
The orchard is quiet now. Apples rest in silken baskets. The muses hum lullabies, not for drama, but for reflection. Pegasus disappears into a constellation, no longer just a hero's sidekick, but myth on his own terms. So breathe, deeper, slower. Let the tale settle into sleep beside you. No applause necessary. You were witness. You were part of it. And tomorrow, perhaps a fig, perhaps a flight, perhaps just the quiet knowledge that stories, like wings, matter most when unfurled gently.